Your weavers are really thick right now, so I think before you start your ending, you should try and thin these out. At least just take the back of the knife to it and pull that grain off. So just as before, you're gonna right over left, make your X. This is gonna come back and behind. But now, this warp that you just wove over is gonna come down, and you're gonna hold it in place, and you're gonna continue your weave. It's almost exactly like your basic twine, but you're pulling that first warp down. So you're gonna make your X, left goes over that warp,
so you're going over two as you're twirling.
and behind this one now.
The danger when twirling is you'll pull too hard too, so be careful.
This one comes down between,
Just take it back a little, okay?
make your X. The left goes over the warp and behind this next one.
Okay, now the gear.
So before you make your X, you put it between
your marker.
Yep. Right over here. So that one goes down. Right over left. Left goes up. And then left goes up and around. So Ariel is getting close to the end of this row. So again, she is taking that left warp, pulling it down between the two wefts, crossing the right over left. Her working weaver comes up and behind the next warp.
Did you do from?
Mm-hmm. She has one left. This is gonna come up and out of the way really quick. We're just gonna hold it in the back. This one has to be needled into the space right here. That one doesn't have a warp in it, so we're just gonna needle that through, and that's gonna lock it in place. And just gently wiggle. And give it a nice tug. This strand here is gonna come underneath this, your first warp. You just pull that out a little and slide that through, locking that one in place. Tug it in. And this one can just fall to the back. And if you want to make sure that it really doesn't come out, you can needle this down 2 or 3 spaces. So I'm just gonna take my needle and go down 2. You see that? The strand that's into the inside, I'm just gonna needle that through. Again, just real gentle. Give it a wiggle. Now that everything's locked in place, you can go along your edge and just kind of tug on all of these and make sure and try and get a nice even row all the way along. And you can see right here that the start, it dips down. That's okay, that's natural. That's just how you've woven the basket, is a spiral. But if you want to tug on these ones just a little bit harder to kind of get that consistent even row, go for it. Once this is completely dry, she can then cut very carefully the rest of the warps off, and it'll have this nice really pretty edge, and she'll be able to see her design again. But you want to wait until it's completely dry, because the red cedar is going to shrink as it dries. And that's it. That's your ending. All this stuff on the inside, she's been trimming along the way. These ones that have been tucked behind, they'll get trimmed when it's all nice and dry as well. Ariel is just making all of her warps the same length around, and she's going to make it short enough that she can see her design on her basket.
So this is a traditional Metlakatla Tsimshian edge that you'll see quite a bit. You see it quite a bit in the Jack Hudson Metlakatla basketry collection. So to start out, you've gone one past your beginning, and you're going to loop these first leadies to leave space to weave the ending. And you're going to 2-ply twine over each one. So you're attaching this loop to the next leadie. And then you're taking this next one, and you're twisting it. So this is the variation. You are not coming straight down. You are twisting and pulling down. Oh, but we want to make a loop. I'm twisting that and attaching it. Now that I've got these 3 loops, I'm going to bring them all the way, the rest all the way down. I'm going to twist and pull that down snugly and do the twine over the top all the way around the basket. And it makes a really pretty finish all around the top of your basket.
Do you ever thin out your warps at the top here to get a nice tight edge, or do you want it to be the same as the sides?
You know, I usually just keep them the same. I try to get my warps, nice and even in thickness so that that's not an issue. But if they do, or if there is one that seems a little thick, then I will thin it out, because you don't want, sometimes you can go around and then you'll have one that's chunky, and you want them to be pretty uniform and even. So you see how that's making kind of a twisted loop all the way. Auntie Lillian did this one a lot, Lucy Rainman. Lucy Rainman and Auntie Lillian Buchert, were really good friends, and for a long time they traveled around teaching basketry, and they were a basket teaching team, I would say. And so they shared a lot of techniques. You can see really good that fold in there. You want that nice flat fold before you do your stitch. I'm just going around making sure that all my stitches are tight, pulling down my spiral edge. Just has that kind of twist pattern all the way around your edge. And so now I'm going to weave through these loops, and each one of these I will treat as a warp. This one right here is doubled over, and this one's doubled over, but I'm going to treat it as one. I'm going to feed it through. Turn that down and stitch over the top. Feed that through, come around both of these warps that are together. Stitch over. Feed it through again.
Through the middle.
Through the middle. And you hope that doesn't happen, but we'll work with it. Feed this through the other side. Over that top. Goes through the last one, and then we pull all 3 loops down. Tight. And you'll let it dry. Clip your hooes and your warps. You just clip them right here and here because they're already woven in really good right here. And then they'll just basically disappear into your basket.
We're working on Flora Mather's finish to the inside, and it has this beautiful twisted look to it. So we're going to take our right weaver and cross it over. Our working weaver is going to come behind, but it's going to stay there for just a second. And this warp that we're working with, we're going to give it 3 good twists. 2, 3. And we're now going to take our next warp, go in front and between, lay it down in the back, and we're going to finish our twine with that working weaver right on top. So that's going to lock it in place. And we're going to do that again, make our X, bring our working weaver up between, twist, twist, twist. It goes in front of the next warp and between that space. And now our working weaver comes right in between that space as well, on top of that warp. We're going to pull it snug. It's going to lock it in place. So again, we made our X. It's going to come up in the space, rest for a second, twist, 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 in front of the next warp and behind, We're going to pull that working weaver back up and over that twisted warp for that beautiful finish to the inside. And once we get all the way around our basket, we can go back through and just give these warps a nice little tug to make the edge of our basket nice and flush and even.
The ending I want to show was taught to me by my gram Violet Booth. I learned one way with her, and then my cousin Roxanne Elise, or Rocky, she showed me kind of an alternative way to do that, because she also learned from my gram Violet, our gram Violet. But to start, I take the warp that my first warp, and I fold that down, I guess, so it crosses the next warp. I bring the working weaver up and around. I do the other weaver, pull that down. Now I'm going to pull the next warp down. Just kind of adjust things, pull them tight. Take that working weaver up and around the next warp. Pull the other weaver down. Pull the next warp down. Adjust things. Pull the working weaver up and around the warp. Pull the other weaver down. Pull this warp down. This one is S, and down here is Z. So that's noticeably different. So I'll go all the way around, keeping these, or making these loops here with the warps. And when I get here, I'll feed my remaining weft all the way around the loops. And once I do that, I'll start to pull these looped warps down. So I'll do the last, last couple movements, pulling the warp down and the working weaver up. And this time because I've got a loop there, I'm going to go through that. I'm going to cut the end of my working weaver. I'm going to cut it almost like a needle so it can go through that loop easier. So that uses up all of my all my warps, and I'm just going to feed these remaining wefts through the loops, and then I'm going to pull them tight to just secure them in place. So they're both through there, so I'll just pull these down. Do a little at a time first. Then I can go through, and if there's any that are too high and not flush with the others, then I can pull those down. So just kind of make things flush and even all the way around.
Then do you cut it right away or do you let it dry?
I'll let it dry. I'll maybe if I have a rubber band or tie a piece of cedar around the warps that are folded down. That way they kind of will dry down instead of like out and away from the basket. Then after everything is dry, then I'll go and decide how I want it to cut cut the warp, because, maybe you want to cut it just in line all the way around, or you can get fancy and maybe cut at a diagonal or something to add a little different, I guess, look. I finished weaving it yesterday and let it dry overnight, and it's really dry. So now I'm going to clean it up by cutting off the false embroidery tips and the tips on the ending, and then any other little strands that are outside or inside the basket.
We've got to the end of this basket and we're about to do the ending. It's a wrapped twining, and we want to just measure one end to go all the way around, like so. So we're going to have a short end and a long end of this weaver. And the short end is it's just going to wrap around as we weave. It's not going to move. And what Flora would do, Flora Mather, is she would take this first warp and bend it in half. She would do one compact twine to the next warp. Oops. Try and hold that in place. Pull it nice and snug. Do another compact twine, which will bring our short piece right back to where we need it, behind that warp. And now we're going to start the wrapping. So we'll take the one that we just wove around, and we're going to lay it on top of that short weaver, and take our working weaver and wrap it around both of those pieces. The short weaver and the warp that you just wrapped around goes behind the next warp. Make sure your tension is the same. You want to, if it bulks up a little bit here, just give it a nice little tug. We're going to fold the one that we just wove around down. It's going to lay against the previous warp and the working weaver. Not the working weaver, sorry. The short weaver. Working weaver comes around and it wraps behind all three of those pieces. Like that. Okay. Give it a tug, tighten it up. I'm going to do it one more time. So now you have these three pieces that are going to go behind the next warp.
What's the other?
This one's a little bit thin. We go behind the second one. And now this first one that we just wove around is going to come down. And it's going to get wrapped with the others. Okay. You pull that tight. We've got 4 pieces here that are gonna, if we keep doing this, it's gonna get thicker and thicker and thicker as we go along. So when you're laying these on top of that warp that's going all the way around, you wanna make sure they stay in the same pattern that they went down. So this is the very first one that went down, this is the second one, and this is the third. But because it's going to keep getting thicker, we need to cut that first one as close as we can so that we have a nice even consistency all the way through. So I've again, I have 4 strands here. I'm going to pull these 2 back away. This is my weaver, that stays down. This is the first warp that came down and across. I'm just going to cut it as close as I can. And continue weaving. So these go behind the second warp. First one comes down and it gets wrapped with the working weaver. Give that warp that you just pulled down a nice little tug. Okay, so now I have, again, these 3. I'm going to take the bottom, I'm going to cut that away, because I'm always having 3 strands. And continue on. So I'm just dampening my material because it's getting a little bit dry and we don't want it to crack. It broke in half and it's a little bit shorter. So should I just not cut?
Yeah,
Okay.
don't cut it.
Do a couple and then when I get back to the thickness,
Yeah.
I can start cutting again.
And you really pull these tight, don't let them be
That's where I
like,
stopped.
yeah, you need to really pull them tight.
The weft that's wrapping around, it's frayed, so I need to replace it. So what I'm going to do is, with my new weft, I've thinned out this end here, so it's really super fine, super thin, so that it doesn't compromise the thickness of the ending. And I'm going to take my needle and go back 3 of these stitches on the end. Just very gently underneath that wrap. And I'm going to pull it through. Very gently, just wiggle. And before I pull it all the way through, that thin end, I'm going to tie a knot so I don't pull it out. Pull it through, and that's going to lock it in place right there. And then it's going to come right behind here, down, and on top of that one that I'm replacing. Okay, and then we can just continue on with our normal weave. And this is not a place that you want to be adding, but it happens, so. And I'm just gonna let that one that broke, I'm just gonna let it fall away as I continue my stitch. I've come to the last weft of this basket for the finish, and I'm going to bring it down. I'm gonna wrap that working weaver up and around just as before, just like I was doing the entire time. All nice and tight.
You get in your Zen mode, right?
And then all of this, I'm going to pull it through this loop. It's the loop that we left at the beginning.
And then before you cut anything, pull those 2 through that, the one little loop and then the next one.
The top 2?
Yes,
Okay.
those 2. You don't have to do the others, just those 2.
Using the eye of the needle, I'm just gonna go back underneath these two, right?
Right.
And one at a time.
And you thinned it out, so.
I did.
Okay.
I thinned it out. Just very gently, one at a time, pulling them through. And now I'm gonna do the second one. So even though I thinned it out, it's still, these ones here are really tight, so it's hard to work my needle through. So we're gonna grab some needle nose pliers to make it easier to pull through without damaging the wefts that are here. Gently try and pull this through without breaking our needle. Perfect. So that's gonna lock those in place. So I'm just gonna tuck those two back behind and through that first loop. We're gonna bring that working weaver and make sure it's not twisted. Bring it up and then tug on that to make it nice and tight. And then we're just gonna weave this into the back with our needle under the tube. Just gentle, perfect. And that's gonna lock it in place. Just twist it. Pull that one a little bit tighter. I'm just going to manipulate the material to go where we want it. Again, just put that to the back, lock it in place, and there's our edge. And you can see in the back it has this really nice, pretty, almost like a coil all the way around.